Technology. More about that later when I get David here. Do, do, do. Do, do, do. Technology. More about that later when I get David here. Do, do, do. Remember that when I was recording myself? This thing's still working. Don't worry, we'll be ready in a minute. Do, do, do. Campfire chat. Ah, here we are. Time for the ringy dingies.
Hello, Your Eminence.
Hello, Your Affluence. Clyde Holt's here too. So, and we're live on.
Hello, Clyde.
Yep, he says hi to you too. We're live on live stream, and I've got something very important to point out before you give us some of your dribble. And you know what that is?
Go ahead.
There's a nuclear exercise running from yesterday until the 17th of August in Indiana, among other states. And I just got an email from one of our contributors, that being Trooper Campbell of the Highway Patrol. And Trooper Campbell says, you guys have been predicting this forever. So we can expect that people were going to migrate into the chat room, because I had to build another show when I found out about that. And what I will do while you're talking about something, whatever you wish to talk about, is I'm going to go send a threat window to the federal government and also to the Canadians and the English people, and you'll see that before we hang up the phone today. So I'll say over to you, and I'm going to go try to find the chat room and make sure everybody knows what's going on.
Okay, thanks, Field. So what I've done is put up a couple of images, which are, not being an expert on aviation crashes and disasters, that strike me as rather curious. One is the crash, I think, about 2 years ago at Richmond, BC, YVR. And apparently the crash was considered to be survivable, but Transportation Safety Board Canada said that people have to look at the possibility of shutting down batteries that continue to function even after a crash, and may cause a spark and may cause a fire that might cause some pilots to die instead of getting out of the plane and surviving. And if you look at the damage of the plane, and you're the expert, Field, and perhaps someone else in the chat room can comment on that, and you compare it with the damage to the Asiana Boeing 777 that crashed in San Francisco airport, and you can see that the curious thing is the fuel tanks in the wings evidently were not contributing to the fire. The wings are totally intact, and the whole of the top of the plane, which is, I believe, Boeing's first fly-by-wire plane, is burned off, opened up almost like a sardine can. My understanding is a lot of the fly-by-wire electronics and flight control computers are in the top of the fuselage, and therefore would provide evidence if the fly-by-wire systems were hacked and the plane came into land.
Your phone's ringing, David.
Yeah, okay, you answer it. Go ahead, Field, and I'll pick up the phone.
I can't answer your phone. What a klutz he is. See, my phone's not ringing, but anybody that wants to make my phone ring, I'm at 715-307-8222. Regarding this exercise and regarding these frequent crashes of trains, planes, and automobiles, I honestly believe, and first of all, who am I? I'm not Bengal, but I know Bengal. He's Irish. But my name is Field McConnell, Field McConnell. I think all of these exercises and accidents are the exercises, of course, can be canceled, and I'll be sending an email to the government when David gets back from his Chinese takeout or whatever that phone call is about. Uh, the bottom line is Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, and David Cameron, Bullington Wanker, they know that they've been hacked intellectually and they've been hacked technologically, and they've been hacked spiritually. And the only one of those three that matters is the spiritual hacking. It's not to say they're heartless, because they appear to have no heart, but I fully believe that you're going to see an increasing pace of fear-generating events or announcements, and the fear or the attempt to cause fear in our hearts is simply because they are overwhelmed and consumed with fear, as well they should be. If somebody wants to look up Hebrews 10:27 and paste it, it tells you what the enemies of God have to look forward to. Who are the enemies of God? Well, I gave you two names already: Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, and David Cameron. And just so I don't sound like I'm anti-gay, I'll throw in a couple of female names you might recognize: Hillary Clinton, Jamie Gorelick, Janet Reno, Hillary Clinton. I know I already said it. She's worthy of 3 times. Let's try it a third time. Hillary Clinton, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, and the person who sits above all those other women, Chris Marcy. David, are you back yet?
Yes, I am, Phil.
Yeah, I was just telling these people that there's an exercise, nuclear disaster exercise, that went live yesterday. So if you want to talk about something trivial like an airplane crash in Richmond, BC, go ahead, and I'll send a letter to the government right now, and I'll post it in the chat room before I send it.
Okay, Phil. Although I'd be quite interested in contributing to your missive there, because I think, let me just put this up again. What's happened is that Bob Paulson, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Commissioner, back in the 1980s was flying fighter jets for Canada. Whether or not he ever went head-to-head with you in these dogfights, I don't know, but he presumably would have been a contemporary when he was flying his jets. What would the Canadian Air Force have been flying by way of fighter jets back in the 80s, Field? Over to you.
Well, in 1986, you gave me permission Monday not to be humble, and God's given me permission to let her rip and open up with a broadside barrage. And yes, I did say broad, and I did say barrage. In fact, David, yes or no? Do you know what a broadside barrage is from a battleship, say the Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, or South Dakota? Yes or no?
No.
It's 9 16-inch guns firing at the same time. And watch how fast Craig Peterson puts up an image of a broadside barrage. It's not the safest maneuver because there's so much recoil from 9 16-inch. Well, each of those 16-inch guns launches the equivalent of a Volkswagen, and they can go about 60 miles. So there's a lot of recoil. In fact, I think our agent Erman over in Romania, and notice I didn't say Corina Cretu, and I didn't say Wergusifer, but Corina Cretu was corresponding with Colin Powell, and she said, "I'm not necessarily trying to get you in bed. I'd just like to see you again." Well, he's in bed with the devil, isn't he? And so is Barry. Well, let's not call him Barry Swatero. By the way, David, you probably didn't see this in yesterday's news either. Barry Swatero was registered as a voter in Washington, D.C. during the last election cycle. However, Barry Swatero's voter registration has disappeared in the last week. And when asked about it, the people who register voters in the District of Columbia say, well, there never could have been a Barry Swatero because we don't cleanse our records. If he was ever here, we'd have him. Well, unfortunately for those lying snakes, screenshots of his registration, in fact, I would be willing to bet you Trooper Campbell was the guy who sent that to me. And if the trooper pulls over for a donut at a Tim Hortons coffee shop somewhere up near, say, let's see, what was the name of that where Russell Williams? Yes, Tweed. I think it was Cove Drive in Tweed. And there's a nice Tim Hortons up there. If Trooper Campbell pulls in and grabs some coffee, maybe he could let me know if he was the source of Barry Swatero's registration to vote, because that would prove that Barack Obama, if that's who you think he is, which he's not, he may have voted twice, once in Chicago and once in D.C. He's probably the only person in the United States of America who would vote twice for him for anything other than a blindfold, a cigarette, and a short drop. But the people who are trying to destroy the United States of America, what they're guilty of collectively is celebrating before they get in the end zone. And so, David, if you can talk about something scintillating, I'll go send a brief message to the governments of Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. The operation that they have is Operation Blackjack. I'm going to advise them if Operation Blackjack includes 4 nuclear devices, 3 from Palandava and 1 from Minot, North Dakota, they have 2 bad choices. They can either cancel their Operation Blackjack because we fingered them in advance, or they can go ahead and let it go. No, if they let it go, we have fingered them in advance. If they cancel it, they'll show what cowards they are. And we know what cowards they are. Aren't you, Cameron? Barry Swatero, Stephen Glamourboy Harper. You guys make me sick. David, over to you. I got a letter to write.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Will you stay in earshot? So if I need
I'm
you,
right here.
come?
I'm right here, and if I die, Pastor Holt will tell you I was smiling when I hit the floor.
Okay. All right. So we have made reference a few times to this idea of 6s and 7s, where a crime scene is attended by 2 teams. One team carries out part of the crime and then cleans up the evidence of the other team, or disrupts the evidence, or spoliates the evidence, and the other team commits part of the crime and cleans up the evidence of the others. So when we have, for example, pressure cooker bombs at the Boston Marathon, and pressure cooker bombs placed on Canada Day outside the BC legislature, and the police triumphantly record their success in either making the problem not as bad as it might have been, or actually thwarting it, we need to be looking at to see if over the centuries of British intelligence and delivery companies' involvement in these kind of crimes, whether the police could have been entrapped and then extorted to actually launch stings that entrap innocent citizens, and then adjust the evidence at the crime scene to keep the spotlight away from the police. So just want to go back to this guy, Bob Paulson. So in the 1980s, he was flying fighter jets for the Canadian Air Force. Possibly he tangled with Field McConnell. We don't know that for sure, but they would have been contemporaries. So anyway, he would have been chalking up brownie points for his army pension. And the army or military pensions in Canada today are managed by the same people as those who manage the RCMP's pension, which is kind of interesting because Bob Paulson is now the commissioner of the RCMP. So there is potential there for a huge conflict of interest where Canadian soldiers and the RCMP are deployed to crime scenes involving Canadians. For example, the gas attack in Algeria that was masterminded by Canadian citizens. And presumably, is being investigated by the Canadian Military Intelligence, if that's not oxymoronic, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, headed up by Bob Paulson. Now, my memory is getting a little vague, but from memory, it appears that there was a very sophisticated attack involving Land Rover type vehicles and switching of uniforms to get inside that compound. I think it was run by SNC-Lavalin, which is one of these corrupt, parasitical, bureaucratic government-run quangos, quasi-autonomous non-government organizations, that suggest that the SNC-Lavalin personnel were on the inside of the attack and let these people in to shoot up as many people as they could. But it is a characteristic that the evidence has all disappeared, all but disappeared, very similar to the way Hillary took care of evidence at Benghazi. Coming back to the 6s and 7s, what's extraordinary in Benghazi is that the security detail for Obama's ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens, was recruited through a British company in South Wales by the name of Blue Mountain. And Blue Mountain set up the roadblocks, which apparently allowed armed personnel to attack the compound, whilst at the same time broadcasting the media story that the prophet had been insulted by some rinky-dinky outfit in California, an ex-jailbird, who'd scripted a film called Innocence of Muslims, and then dubbed the script so the actors who originally participated in that film didn't recognize it, and they were strongly protesting they had nothing to do with it. So what we've got there, I think, all the evidence is this was a man-in-the-middle attack using spread betting to reward the participants to spot fix the rape, torture, and murder of Christopher Stevens. I would suggest at a specific time on September the 11th, 2012. And the bookmaker who was taking the bets from the big pension funds, you know, California Public Employees Retirement System, New York City Employees Retirement System, etc., would have told the trustees of these pension funds, would have extorted the trustees of those pension funds, and told them, unless you place your bets under or over the time in which Christopher Stevens was sodomized, tortured, and killed in front of a camera, backhauling the images to the White House, so little Barry could get his rocks off watching his ambassador being tortured, because, folks, that's what he likes to do. He was groomed for that when he was 8 years old in Jakarta. These people have participated in decades of film production involving sadomasochistic sex with victims, including children, recorded on film so that they can subsequently be extorted. So now Field is talking about this nuclear exercise. Well, let's just go to another exercise quite famous last year. That's the lone gunman exercise taking place in Bridgeport in Connecticut, where I used to live.
Newtown, wasn't it?
Go ahead.
Was it Bridgeport or Newtown?
Bridgeport was where the lone gunman exercise was taking place, and Newtown was the decoy place where they wanted the public to think there was an attack.
Okay, I'm right in the middle of this letter I'm sending right now. That's the reason I stopped. I'm only listening with half of one ear, but you're going to love this letter because sometimes less is more, and this is quite the letter. I can't wait to post it. It'll be posted in 3 to 4 minutes. David, I'll let you have it back, but what you're talking about and what I'm sending the government, I'm actually taking delight because I'm not putting any personal lubricant on this one. I'm just sticking it right where they don't want it stuck. Over to you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Field. So around the 14th century, there start to be references, or 15th century, to battles between the Worshipful Company of Merchant Tailors and the Worshipful Company of Skinners, where they would fight each other for precedence in the Lord Mayor's procession. And the Lord Mayor's procession in the City of London is led by iconic figures known as Gog and Magog, which is the twin faces of evil, I suppose. And the poor people back then, many of whom were illiterate, got some kind of impression, I guess, that the City of London and its livery companies were all powerful. And if Gog didn't get you, Magog would. And if Magog didn't get you, Gog would. So these people appear to have become exceedingly skilled at engaging in sabotage, assassination, and deception by going into a crime scene, hence the phrase putting it at sixes and sevens. And the GOG people or the red team would do a hit, and then their job as they exited the crime scenes would be to disrupt or spoliate evidence of the Magog team doing another part of the hit. So in the mass murder at Newtown in Connecticut, for example, there were 20 children and 6 adults killed. 6 adults in the teaching staff, as I understand, and another casualty was Adam Lanza. But apparently, I can't pull that up in front of me at the moment, Adam Lanza allegedly died the day before. So it would appear what they're doing in scripting these events is they're shipping bodies in and out of the morgue to make up the numbers to deliver the spot that needs to be fixed to secure the profits of the bookmaker who's got the book on the spread bets. The objective of the bookmaker is to demonstrate, going back to the 14th century, that the bookmaker, whoever they is, we can come to that in a minute, is all powerful, and they can arrange events with a spread of body counts. So let's say, for example, they said to the bettors, that is the big pension funds, we want you to place your bets on between 22 and 18 children killed at a school in Connecticut, and you can bet over or under. If you're over and under, and the spread is 18 to 22, and actually 20 children die, then the underbettors don't transfer money to the overbettors. The overbettors don't transfer money to the underbettors. But from a political and a strategic point of view, it may very well be that the underbettors and the overbettors trustees want around 20 children to die in order to increase the pressure on disarming Americans for military grade or assault rifles. So what the bookmaker would have done, and we know the name of the bookmaker, it's the CAI private equity group launched by Alexander Haig in 1989. What the bookmaker would have done was then go out and recruit some red teams and blue team players, probably from the prison population vastly expanded by Field Sister Christine Marcy and the Deputy Attorney General at the time, Jamie Gorelick. I would say probably those two women increased the prison population or put in place operations in the Bureau of Prisons to expand the population of the prisons in the United States of America by 1 million people. And of course, when you store men and women in cells for prolonged periods of time, you're going to trigger some pretty bizarre sexual behavior. It's just the nature of the beast. If you're providing services to the prisoners in jail, including children, which is what was done in Her Majesty's prisons in the United Kingdom to satisfy the instincts, if that's the right word, of the Cray twins, you're going to end up with A, a corrupted prison population, and B, a corrupted guard population, the people responsible for guarding these people. Because to bring a child into a cell and ultimately dispose of what's left of the child after he's been abused or she's been abused by the inmates, you're going to have the cooperation of the guards. So what the Crays did with Her Majesty's prison systems in the United Kingdom is they corrupted it totally, and built a population moving through the prison system, both of guards and felons, that could be deployed at crime scenes. Phil, can you answer that?
No,
Sorry.
it's your phone. You answer your
Yeah,
phone.
okay.
Go away.
All
Come
right, go
back
ahead.
later. Okay, this is Field again. I'm posting my letter. In fact, I'm going to back up here, and I'm going to hog this. Here is my email. Okay, I'm going to post it right here. And what I would like everyone to do is read it through. And then if you think it's threatening enough, which I do, or if you see any academic, punctuation, or logic errors, and I presume that, well, I guess I'm not going to assume anything. I see your back, David. But David, read my letter here. I haven't sent it yet, but I want everybody at Abel Danger to consider this letter. And it will be sent to the DHS, to Obama, to Cameron, to Stephen Harper, just because I think that even gay people probably like to see other grown men get scared. But this is, I think, David, I think I've explained leverage and arbitrage to you. See if I've mastered it yet. The letter is going to start with Abel Danger believes Operation Blackjack could be could be caused to go from exercise to live as Amalgam Virgo Global Guardians went live on the morning of 9/11. Personnel in a position to switch have two bad choices. I wish I could read more of this. Allow the exercise to switch, knowing Abel Danger has posted Palin Dava plus Obama plus Cameron plus Zuma plus Thatcher plus Field McConnell, and Assumption Parish, Indianapolis, Washington, D.C., Goodyear, Arizona, Portland, Oregon, whereupon Obama and Cameron and the remnants of Haig's octopus will have to explain the nuclear facilities at Blatchford, Frome, Palin Dava, and Gibraltar, and why they, Obama and Cameron, did not stop the exercise. There's more to it, but it's not displayed, so I don't know why not. How do you like that, David? In fact, don't answer me yet, David. I'll read the rest of this. The second choice is if the exercise does not go live, those who cancel it will appear inept cowards. Then I sign my name, U.S. Marine 0116513, and my telephone number starting with +001. So, David, on first blush, how do you like that letter?
I think that's excellent, Phil. And if I may, I'm just going to put in one line as a suggestion. So can you just keep talking, and I'll have that up in 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. And I just posted it again. And maybe if I hit these three little things. In fact, I'm going to demonstrate my ignorance here. Can somebody? Oh, never mind. I got it. Yeah, now I can see. You have to push that thing. It says there's a button up at the upper top I didn't push. Yeah, so choice one, allow the exercise to switch, knowing Abel Danger has advertised who did it. Number two, if the exercise does not go live, those who cancel it will be appearing to be inept cowards. Inept cowards. David Cameron, Nick Clegg, Barry Swatero, Punahou 679. Let's see, Eric Holder. Eric Holder and Barry Swatero, I wonder when they dance, if they do the girl part of the dance. In other words, they follow, because they're certainly not leaders. By the way, we might have a new agent from Eastern Europe, and keep in mind that not only have I been to, well, there's a country that embraces Europe and the Middle East. That country's Turkey. It's 99.98% Muslim. Whoop-de-doo. They're nice people. I've talked to them. They're not radical. At least they didn't blow me up, even though I was in town sometime in 2008 when they blew up the church. Had I been in that church, I would have been hijacked or kidnapped because it was some type of a Catholic church. If it was a Muslim church, I might go in out of interest, and also to be a go-between between Christians and Muslims. Because you see, in the Bible, it says in the end, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Well, if everybody's kneeling and bowing, that includes the Muslims too. I think the Muslims are converting to Christianity quicker than any other faith-to-faith conversion. I also think the biggest Christian church in the world, maybe in Seoul, Korea. It's in Korea. And the Chinese people, too, maybe it's because they're getting so lonely over there because their parents killed all the girls and a bunch of frustrated young men. But apparently China is getting more bold in a Christian way, too. So cowards like Barack Obama and cowards like David Cameron and cowards like Stephen Harper, they can reach out to the Queen, the German goose-stepping fartinghams, P-H-A-R-T, not what you thought I heard. But anyway, David, what do you think of this letter? And I'm going to go, you tell me what your edit is, and I'll edit it right now.
Okay. Let me just make sure I've got yes, I've got it on. All right, I'm putting that in.
Okay.
Okay, so what I propose is, Field, that you add this sentence underneath, your opener.
Yep.
The switching of an exercise into a mass casualty, that's grammatically unsound, into a mass casualty event is orchestrated through man-in-the-middle attacks on Cisco air-gap for SIPRNet and NIPRNet platforms out of the RCMP-E division in Surrey, BC. Check Paulson. Now, I propose that you put that in, Field, because first of all, it opens up a flank that no one in the United States, I would predict, could ever imagine that someone would set up a man-in-the-middle attack outside the reach of RICO. Obviously, it has to be because of the strength of the RICO legislation. In a ostensibly friendly country, which is Canada. But then if they do check with Paulson, they will find that, well, A, he was a fighter pilot, a contemporary of yours, and allegedly in the virtual world, you could say that you were handling him quite successfully in the 1980s, and you intend to repeat your performance. Is that plausible?
It's more than plausible, and I've already got it incorporated in here. And I added one symbol to yours. And when I first talked to you, and that was the 6th of December of 2006, and I introduced myself, and I said that Dan Handley from Atlanta, Georgia, had asked me to call you because you were looking for an American pilot. You said, are you an airline pilot or a military pilot? Do you remember what I said? It was one word.
Why?
No, both.
Both.
And then you said, "Oh, this is like Christmas." Well, guess what? let me see if you pick up. And I'm going to read the whole letter calmly, and I've added your thing, but I've added one character, and I didn't say letter or number. See if you can pick it up. I'll give you a hint. It's in the last line. Uh, attention, you officials. Abel Danger believes Operation Blackjack could be caused to go from exercise to live just as Amalgam Virgo Global Guardians went live on the morning of 9/11. Personnel in a position to switch have two bad choices. Allow the exercise to switch, knowing Abel Danger has posted the Google bait, Palin, Daba, Obama, Cameron, Zuma, Thatcher, plus Field McConnell. I want to stop right there. And it's not egotism here. It's a max demonstration of testosterone. They expect everybody to hide and shrink. There's no hiding and shrinking going on in Plum City. Okay, back to the letter. And Assumption Parish, Indianapolis, Washington, D.C., Goodyear, Arizona, Portland, Oregon, whereupon Obama and Cameron, and I see that error, I'll change it, and the remnants of Haig's octopus will have to explain the nuclear facilities at Blatchford. There's another thing they don't see coming because they'll be scratching their rear trying to figure out who Blatchford is. And the only place they can find anybody talking about Blatchford, David, is Abel Danger. But anyway, back to my letter. Explain the nuclear facilities at Blatchford, from Palin, Daba, and Gibraltar, and why they, Obama and Cameron, did not stop the exercise. 2, if the exercise does not go live, those who cancel it will appear inept cowards. You are inept cowards, Cameron. In fact, Cameron, I'm trying to remember if the law firm that your wife worked at was Wanker, Tosser, Shirtlifter, and Wanker, or is one of those wankers a banker? But anyway, back to this thing. Here comes your sentence, David, where there's one character that I've added. See if you can detect it. The switching of an exercise into a mass casualty event is orchestrated through man-in-the-middle attacks on Cisco air gap for SIPRNet and NIPRNet platforms out of the RCMP E division in Surrey, BC, parentheses. Check 6, Paulson.
Yeah, I like it.
Do you know what check 6 means?
Yeah, look behind you.
Yeah, it's fighter pilot talk for you just died. When fighter pilots sneak up on each other and they get in a position where they can launch a skinny little wingman, which means an AIM-9M or later, when you can stick a skinny wingman up the tailpipe of your victim, you don't fire the missile because that would waste a $100,000 missile on your half. And, you know, I don't know what the Canadians are paying for their garbage airplanes nowadays, but if they pay anything at all for an F-35 Lightning, they'll be getting the short end of the stick. But then again, Canada attacked America on 9/11, and in the Marine Corps, David, stop making noise. In the Marine Corps, there was a saying, payback is a mother. There's a little more to that saying, but that, yeah, I think Bob Paulson will realize he's just been stick flown into the ground. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to leave the check six Paulson in and send the letter right now while you gab.
Yeah, talking about mothers, there's a cartoon in a magazine called Punch that I think went out of business some decades ago. But there's a picture of a big, hairy trucker, and he's driving a truck called Mother's Bakers. And there's a little guy, and he's holding him by the throat. And obviously, the little guy had honked. Do you have the word honk in American field?
You mean like honk a horn?
Yeah, honk a horn.
Yeah, we honk horns.
Obviously, the little guy had honked at the trucker and enraged the trucker, and he descended from his truck and he took this guy by the throat. And the fella in the caption, it's the little guy saying to the big guy, I think you misunderstood. I suggested that you mother truckers ought to be more careful.
Yeah, I get you. That's what I'm saying too. And
okay.
I'm trying to pay back the people who killed my college classmate, Chick Burlingame, by making it look like he was he lost control of his aircraft to some young Muslim men. That was American Flight 77, which did not hit the Pentagon. And you know, even if it's 12 years too late to identify the perpetrators of the attack of 9/11, so far God has given us sufficient time, because God controls the world. He may not control it, but he has control of it. What's that expression I'm looking for?
He overrules.
Yeah, very good distinction. Some people would say God rules the world, and Clyde has told me 3 times now that God overrules. Let me make this real clear. I'm sending this letter to David Cameron and Barack Obama, who think they have the ability to cause a nuclear exercise to go live in the United States of America, since I've demanded in writing that he step down by October 22nd or else. Well, these little sissies, they can do whatever they want. They can tell somebody to go ahead and blow up a nuke at Assumption Parish, Louisiana, or Goodyear, Arizona, or one of the 3 AMEC holes in Yellowstone, Montana. AMEC, did you hear your name? Yes, I thought you heard it. David, I think this is the point where we win, because they're over a barrel. They can either let a nuclear exercise go live, in which case the names Cameron Obama are going to have some people to answer to, like 7 billion people, or they can be little chicken shits and cancel it. David, over to you.
Yeah, that's right, Field. So this is a flank attack from behind and the rear and all around them. And I've just put up a picture of a Cisco emergency communications truck. And all you need to do to get inside an exercise and turn it from a simulation to a mass casualty event, paid out of the profits or the vigorish collected by the bookmaker for spending on the 2 teams who spot the event in between the spread. Now, what that means is that the California Public Employees Retirement System, and let's say the Teachers Pension Fund in the States, which is the world's largest private pension fund with $500 billion in it, these dumb people who run these huge funds, they're told you have to bet because if you don't bet, we're going to destroy your pension fund and we're going to take investments in Nortel and drive it into bankruptcy. So the trustees are forced to bet. But what they don't want is to go outside the spread, because then one set of trustees, let's say the teachers, are obliged to pay huge amounts of money to another set of trustees, which is the California Public Employees Retirement System. And that would alert the sleeping masses, the members of these pension funds, who all they want is a monthly check when they retire. I mean, there's two dynamics in someone, let's say, approaching middle age in a profession or in a job. One is the salary they get today to go out and spend on their donuts and their cars and their toys and all the rest of it and their holidays. Nothing wrong with that. And the other is what they expect to get when they retire. As you approach, retirement, it gets very nerve-wracking for people, and I've been there, or I am there, when you try and work out what your monthly spend is when the money's coming in out of in your retirement from pension. So it would be very easy to take people in any profession, firefighters, ambulance, police, etc., and say, look, we've got certain ways of maximizing your income today, but they're illegal, so you probably might not want to do it. But when it comes to maximizing your retirement income, we have to take certain risks because the market is so volatile. So the risks we take, you don't have to know too much about it. Just keep your mouth shut, do what we tell you, and you're going to have a nice retirement on 80, 90% of your final income. So this kind of spread technique of engaging otherwise legitimate employees in otherwise legitimate government agencies through their pension funds on sitting either side of a criminal act, I think it's extremely powerful. Now, the insiders, of course, can make huge amounts of money provided they deliver the spot within the spread. My guess is if the spot is outside the spread, these people are hunted down and killed because they cannot afford to let this technique leak out. So let me just put up this picture again because I think it's so dramatic. Here you have this Cisco emergency communication systems, which I allege supports man-in-the-middle attacks at exercises that are required to turn into real mass casualty events where there is betting taking place on the body count. Now, where did this technology come from? Well, I think Cisco was created in 1987, something like that. In 1993, Cisco procured a development of Entrust public key infrastructure through a Canadian company named McDonald Detweiler and Associates. That ring a bell, Field? Over to you.
Yeah, and I'm adding up, it rings a bell, but McDonald Detweiler and Associates are the creeps that attacked America on 9/11 with the Final Approach software. You know me, I always have a hard time ending a chapter. I just had another thought here as I'm addressing this letter. Under my signature, I'm adding a sidebar to Governor Malloy. You've forgotten who he is. Governor Malloy is the governor of Connecticut. Oh, and let me interrupt myself. This is a message directly to Bob Paulson, who claimed he was a fighter pilot at one time. If you ever flew against me when I was flying F-4s or F-16s at the North Dakota Air National Guard, you'll remember me as the guy who gave you, and you got to listen to this because this is fighter talk, not slum language. I'm the guy that gave him a real bad case of pipper tracks. Pipper tracks are what's up and down the back of your helmet when somebody much better than you is sticking the pipper of their gun sight right in the canopy of your aircraft. Because with a missile, you shoot the tailpipes or the radar cross-section. With guns, you can shoot any part of the airplane you want. But a really good place to shoot an airplane is right in the canopy. That happened to my dad in World War II. He said it didn't feel good. I believe my dad, and I honor my dad. I wish my sister would have honored her mother and her father. David, the last sentence of this letter, which everybody will have, say by 5 after the hour, sidebar to Governor Malloy. And David, I got to set this up too because you didn't read today's news. Governor Malloy, coward that you are, he's really a basket case because on tape, right after the Newtown false flag street theater involving John Simmons's crisis actors and Vision Box. Gee, you might as well have just had Margie Sullivan and Red Tree Productions come and help, because everybody else involved screwed it up completely. But anyway, Governor Malloy immediately said, you know, it's interesting, but the federal government told us to expect an incident like this. Well, geez, Governor, if you're expecting one, why don't you defense against it? Point number one. Now this little Twinkie governor of Connecticut, Malloy, and I'm also addressing this to his chief of police in Newtown, Michael Kehoe. They are going on record. Today's news is saying they're about ready to issue a revised timeline for the killing of 26 people in Sandy Hook. So here's what I'm writing, David. In fact, for those of you who can't stand it, just like I can't, there it is right now. Sidebar to Governor Malloy. Here is your blanking timeline. Then I'm going to put the Google search down. Brackets. DHS plus DMORT 5 plus HSEEP plus crisis actors plus Vision Box plus Napolitano plus yours truly, Field McConnell. Here it comes. Grab your ankles. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I'm glad you mentioned DMORT, because that reminded me of something I wanted to talk about. Is with these spread bet mass casualty events, let's say in the case of the Connecticut school, the Newton Sandy Hook Elementary School, they wanted 20 dead children to fall between a lower limit of 18 and an upper limit of 22. Now, my guess is if they'd come in under 18, the killers would have been killed immediately afterwards. If they had come in over 22, they'd have been killed. So the two groups of people, one making sure the casualty rate is below 22, and the other that it's above 18, they go into the crime scene. Maybe they've got their FBI or their SWAT team jackets, or, you know, they're prisoners that have been let out of jail by Christine Marcy. And they come into the crime scene, and it's quite possible the blue team does not know who the red team are, and the red team doesn't know who the blue team are, but both teams are in perfect synchronicity in terms of communication through the Cisco air gap. And they're told, they're getting real-time instructions, I suggest from E Division in Surrey in British Columbia, on whether to kill or not to kill the victims. So they're sending back, and remember there's closed-circuit television cameras in that school that were installed just before the attack. So they're able in real time to develop a very precise count of the number of children killed. And if they miss, this is intriguing, I think they go off to the local morgues and check for children 6 to 7 years old that have died of some disease or whatever. They bring them to the mortuary, and then they riddle their heads with bullets from an AR-15 to make sure that no one can recognize who they are, and they may very well dress the children in the clothes that the parents of the children had put on them when they went off to school. And the children who actually did not die may very well be abducted into the international pedophile network serviced by the United States Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System, set up in parallel with the medical program by Field Sister Christine Marcy.
It's Chris Marcy. David,
go ahead.
David, it's Chris Marcy. She changed her name to cut down the Google counts.
Oh, all right. So let me go back up to the origins. So I believe these man-in-the-middle attacks and mass casualty events at crime scenes date back to the 14th century or 15th century, if not before, in England. And they're handled by city livery companies. So just to keep it easy, the sixes and sevens phrase is attributed to the battles between the worshipful company of skinners and the worshipful company of merchant tailors. And when you think about it back then, people wore hides, beautiful leather clothing, etc., and silks and brocades and so on. And when Shakespeare in the 16th century was putting on his plays, his actors that were all boys or men, so the boys played the girls' part, they would go off stage, and my guess is that they could be dressed by the people behind the scenes in a completely different manner in about 5 seconds. That is, they would just shed one set of clothing and they'd come back on the stage dressed in a different way. So the Shakespearean troupe and that group of people was very skilled at disguise. I think those skills have been developed to the point where you could very easily envision an exercise at Bridgeport with some actors at Newtown that would, in a few seconds, put on clothing associated with a SWAT team, and then a few seconds later get out of those clothes and into the clothes that would allow them back in the Ghana Correctional Institute for, for lunch. So it's really a very interesting technique. But back to McDonald Detweiler. Let me put this thing up and I'll just read it.
I sent it.
The design and development work for the demonstration system, in parentheses, for the man in the middle, a hack, was done by Canadian industry. Early in 1975, industry was briefed on the program, which included a requirement that the selected contractor committed to entering into the mobile radio data systems business. The contract indicated that a mobile radio data system supported by all of the latest computer aids was beyond both the financial means and the practical requirements of most police forces. Consequently, a smaller system was selected for implementation and installation as a test case. The Vancouver police force indicated an interest. An agreement was reached between DOC, I think that's the Department of Communications or something, the RCMP and the City of Vancouver, wherein the city agreed to pay for all hardware components of an operational system. It's just gone out of my sight. What that essentially did is created a man-in-the-middle position between the 911 dispatcher, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the Vancouver Police Department for crimes within the footprint of those two or three groups. Well, the City of Vancouver, the Vancouver Police, obviously that has a footprint within the City of Vancouver. The RCMP is right across Canada. But I would think that from 1979, there are rumors that the women started to disappear at the pig farm. My guess is what they were doing is they were taking the women out to the pig farm and developing or testing this man-in-the-middle radio system where the dispatcher would get a call, a legitimate call of from some woman or a woman's friend who's been attacked at the pig farm, and they would dispatch police or ambulance to the scene to make sure the woman did not survive as a witness. And I think that's what we will see eventually, and we will bring them to justice with little John Benet Ramsey. The system developed in British Columbia by McDonald Detweiler was integrated with the 911 system, which I believe, Field, over to you in a minute, was developed by AT&T. Is that correct? Over to you.
I don't know, but I do know we have the world's fastest and most lethal chat room. And I do know that Agent Telstar is here in the chat room today. And that's not Telstar, that's Clydesdale. So Agent Clydesdale's on the camera. I'm asking Telstar, I don't know if you're working on top of a building somewhere in the Lone Star State or if you're driving a vehicle. But if you have the answer and you can put it up in chat, David asked about AT&T and some other phony baloney mechanism. What was the other phony baloney mechanism, David?
Sixes and sevens.
Sixes and sevens and AT&T, is that what you are trying to relate?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is, was AT&T given the responsibility for developing the 911 system, in which case AT&T would have a tremendous opportunity to put a crime scene at sixes and sevens. Over to you.
Okay, I don't know if AT&T did 9/11, but Jack Mac may know too. And Liberty, in fact, I get my names mixed up here. I almost slipped, Clyde. Jack, Mac, and Liberty appear to agree. And I just got handed a note. In fact, here's the note right here in case anybody doubts it, from Agent Telstar, that what you say is true, David, that AT&T and 9/11 are connected at the hip. So thank you, Agent Telstar. Thank you, Liberty Hill and Jack Mack. And I think we're on the same page. And David, while you were giving your last little dribbly run-on sentence, I did post my letter to the officials in the U.S., UK, and Canada, and I don't know what they're going to do about that. I mean, uh, if a FBI car pulls up here, I'd be very surprised. Because, see, the problem for them is I'm speaking for the U.S., I'm not speaking for the weasels in Canada. Notice I didn't say the Canadian people, I specified weasels. Like Bob Paulson, you're a weasel. Pepper Tracks, I better not call him Bob Paulson anymore, he might be shy. I'll call him Pepper Tracks. Pepper tracks, again, are when you're so inept, you're a ham-fisted helo pilot trying to be a fighter pilot, and you have nothing but pepper tracks all over the back of your helmet because everybody's gunning your brains out. Well, David, you said on Monday it's okay not to be so humble anymore for both of us. I think in reality, using the metaphor and the slang of the aviation business, specifically air defense or fighter type slang, I think we're gunning their brains out. And there's not a darn thing they can do about it except sit there and get shot up. David, over to you.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I want to compliment Craig. I don't know where he found this incredible image at sixes and sevens. So left to right, there's the image of the dice that are being thrown. And then there's the shield and heraldry on the left-hand side with the three crowns. I would guess that looks like a moose or something like that. So that's probably the Skinners, the worshipful company of Skinners. So there's a hand coming out or an arm coming out of the side where the wrist is being clasped by the hand coming out from the merchant tailors. The merchant tailors heraldry has a lion and then the robes, and I guess that looks like a tent. I'm not sure if that's a tent.
Can I read it to you?
You go ahead.
It says this: another origin might be the dispute between the merchant tailors and Skinner's livery companies in London, both founded in 1327. They argued about who should be sixth and seventh in the order of precedence. The Lord Mayor ruled in 1484 they should swap every year, which they still do. Now, what's the chance that they're using the term swap? And I just sent a threatening letter. I wouldn't want to receive that letter, but then again, I'm not chicken shit like you guys are. Here in English history, they're using swap, and in my letter, I just used switch. And so there's a whole lot of swipping and swatching going on around here. Or is that swatch? Anyway, I'm tongue-tied, but David, I wanted to read that because if you blow it up, if you hit the link, you can see what I'm seeing. It makes it easier to understand. Over to you, David.
And what's the chances that Barry Spataro would be working in New York at BIC, which allegedly is Business International Corporation, but we now know is British Invisibles Corporation. That is, he was working for the livery companies in New York. And what he was working on was leverage leases and currency swaps. So this guy who was groomed as a pedophile entrapment expert from the age of 8 onwards was working on the manipulation of sophisticated financial instruments that could pay off at mass casualty events, such as the leveraged leases that were written on the Twin Towers, where the master servicer was Wells Fargo. And what I imagine was happening, Field, is there was spread betting on the value of the Wells Fargo pass-through certificates as the continuity of government exercise started, because a pass-through certificate is paid off in the event, well, or would be paid off in the event both towers came down on the same day through the same event. And what they hoped to do in London, of course, was double their money. They didn't quite get the insurance notes adjusted in time. Interestingly enough, the insurance broker on that project was Willis Faber, that insured the Titanic. So I think we're going to find that the sixes and sevens crime scene dates back to the 14th century. And to me, this is mind-blowing, Field. I mean, let me just pause, and I'm wordless and speechless at the magic of all this, and let you have a go.
What are you want me to have a go at? I'm looking at my perfect streaming sign. For those of you who like technology, look, there it says right there, it's green. It's got a check mark. I guess I'm better at technology than I'm holding the camera in the right spot. Well, anyway, maybe if I back up. Oh, there we go. It says perfect streaming, 189 kbps, whatever that means. Um, I have a
Kilobits per second.
Oh, I thought you needed to rest your voice. I guess you don't need to rest your voice or you're making me look like an imbecile. Which reminds me, I don't really care what I look like. Right now, I look like I'm Irish because I got Bengo's lawn service, and his motto is just plugging along, and it sounds a lot like plugging along or like pipper tracks. Notice I didn't say Bob Paulson, Commissioner of the RCMP. I specifically referred to that individual who's follically impaired as being the owner of a big set of pipper tracks up and down the back of his neck. Uh, and if Bob Paulson's an honorable person, I hope he does the honorable thing and shines the light on whoever up there is goofing things up in the RCMP, trying to take property that belongs to other people. And notice I didn't say a name, I just said taking property that belongs to other people. And sadly for my sister, Christine Marcy, for my sister, for David Cameron of England, for Nicholas Clegg of England, for Glamour Boy up in 24 Sussex, and for Barry Swatero at 1600 Pennsylvania. Alexander Haig exited stage left and left them holding the bag. That makes you guys collectively the bag man, and somebody's going to come around and tap on your door. David, over to you.
Yeah, that's right, Field. And over on the right of this image that Craig discovered, it's got 6 and 7 and a couple of dice, a question mark and an exclamation mark on the 2 dice, and the phrase or sentence at 6s and 7s is a state of confusion, uncertainty, and unresolved situation, a cold case. Can you think of a better description, Field, of the scene associated with the assassination of JFK in Dealey Harbor, or the Sandy Hook Elementary School, or the Aurora Theater, or the Boston bombing marathon? I mean, this is their signature. They're setting the crime scene at 6s and 7s with 2 teams who, if the 2 teams fail to get the spot inside the spread, I believe are killed immediately in order to keep the secret. Otherwise, if they do succeed in getting the spot within the spread, they get a percentage of the vigorish paid to the bookmaker. The bookmaker is the CAI private equity group launched by General Alexander Haig in 1989. There's a lot of other flakes associated with that. They say it was an investor group out of Salomon Brothers in New York. But if you compare the profile, the battlefield experience, the ability to place snipers and kill people in large numbers, those white-collar guys in New York associated with Salomon Brothers, there's no comparison between those guys and General Alexander Haig, who apparently was a very brave and capable fighter right back to the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And he was, of course, the guy who, in the aftermath of the shooting of Ronald Reagan, said, "I'm in command here." In 1990, he became a director of MGM Mirage, which is one of the world's largest casino resort centers. So he was deeply into the gambling business. He was a special investor in the CAI private equity group that bought McDonald Detweiler back from Orbital Sciences in Dulles, Virginia, to British Columbia in 1999, after McDonald Detweiler had picked up all of the interceptor protocols used by Orbital Sciences to protect America against intercontinental ballistic missiles. So when McDonald Detweiler came back to British Columbia, physically it always had its headquarters in Richmond, BC, not far from YVR, the airport. Basically, they had the protocols necessary to launch a man-in-the-middle attack on 911 and have real-time spread betting run through the Cisco platform that had been confiscated from StarNet at 425 Carroll Street on the 20th of August, 1999. Now, what was going on in Carroll Street, 425 Carroll Street? Well, StarNet started in 1995 producing and selling internet pornography, hardcore pornography, allegedly involving children. StarNet operated film studios on the mezzanine floors at 425 Carroll Street in Victoria, immediately beneath an outfit known as H.A. Simons, which is an engineering consultancy company that had its origins in Chicago. So using the acting profession, if that's the right word, of Hollywood North, and facilities such as the Vancouver Film Studios run by the McLean Group, they could stage an encounter between actors or victims in the snuff film studios at 425 Carroll Street in front of a camera. So you've got Jason McLean, who was the Assistant Secretary to the Office of the Prime Minister of Canada from 2000 to 2002, and he's wandering around the world acting as a liaison officer for meetings with NATO and APEC. I think that's the Association of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So these guys, NATO and APEC, men and women, of course, they wander around the world having meetings. Let's say they come to Vancouver, great spot for a holiday, especially if you love skiing. Some very nice hotels, a concierge or someone who cleans the room invites the occupant of that room to tell him or her what kind of entertainment they would like that night. They get a specification. They'd like the visitor from NATO or APEC would like an encounter with a child. The child's age is specified, and they're invited down to the studios at 425 Carroll Street. And they get into a room with some actors and a child in front of a camera, and they pay a great deal of money through their credit card, which is logged and recorded by the people who are operating StarNet as a front for sexual entrapment and extortion. And it turns out, Phil, that the people operating StarNet as a front for pedophile entrapment and extortion is none other than Bob Paulson, the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. How about that for a theory? Over to you.
Yeah, I'm looking at an image that has 425 Carroll Street, and then my doppelganger. You might remember from the last chapter that went up, there was a doppelganger who looked a lot like me, and he had some red and white check pants, and he had an interesting shirt. In fact, it just dawned on me, David, it's 422. I think it's worth everybody's time if I go out to the presidential limousine and see if I don't have the doppelganger when he left town on Sunday, what would that be, 18, 19, 20. On Sunday, the 21st of July, the doppelganger had to go back to work in Chicago, but he left his outfit with me. And, since he's my body double, we're the same size, 235 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. Stick that in your nostril, Paulson. David, you talk to Clyde. I'm going to go get my doppelganger's clothes. I'll be right back, okay? Give me 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So I just want to put in Michelle Obama and her Sidley team made a 1991 visit to Washington, and she had 3 clients, or the Sidley Austin team had 3 clients. And from memory, one of them was Union Carbide, and that was the aftermath of course, of the attack and sabotage of the Bhopal insecticide plant by British intelligence, using, I would suggest, the McDonald-Weiler two-way radio system to hack into Indian communications. And so she took care with her Sidley Austin team of the Union Carbide cover-up, where the directors were blamed for what was an act of sabotage, because the Obama team at Sidley Austin, in conjunction with, I would suggest, the RCMP and various other intelligence agencies, arranged to pump 47 tons of water into a bath of methoisocyanate, something along those lines, covering the area with a low hanging chlorine gas, killing about 9,000 people and hideously injuring around 280,000 people, which was then an opportunity to demonize for the vermin at Sidley Austin the directors of Union Carbide. And I personally loathe this anti-corporate bullshit, having worked in two large corporations, and never in either of those corporations, the Central Electricity Generating Board or the Schlumberger Company, did I ever meet an engineer or a scientist or a manager who was not trying to do the best they could. So who else did she represent with that Sidley Austin visit to 1991, where I'm very confident she met with either Christine Marcyfield's sister or one or more of her senior executive service associates? Well, she was representing Barney the Purple Dinosaur with PBS. And of course, the interesting thing about Barney the Purple Dinosaur, it's about as fictional or about as far removed from fact as Barry the United States President, because there you have a work of fiction inhabiting the White House. And the other company that she represented with her group from Sidley Austin?
AT&T.
Yeah, very good. And what was the technology that AT&T had introduced that has driven a lot of our work field?
Well, let me just put my thinking cap on. Let's see. Bhopal, Purple Dinosaur, AT&T. I think it was Al Gore and Clipper Technology, and my Clipper squirt gun is right over there, so if Clyde will throw it to me, do you see that yellow squirt gun? David, you know, some people think that we're not serious, but this is really my Clipper squirt gun. And it'd be my pleasure to remove some of these vermin. And David, even though you can't see it, I've just given a style review because I've got the shirt and I got the hat and I got the shoes. Let me put the camera on the shoes of Agent Tillman. And I've got the very natty slacks, the very deluxe clashing pool motif shirt, and the also very stylishly clutching 1973 sport coat that just happened to be exactly my size and had never been worn. And so if we ever have another Plum City plunge, I'll make sure that Agent Tillman, and I don't know if I'll be there or not because I stay pretty busy, but if you guys have another gathering in Plum City and I can't be here, I'll make sure that my doppelganger, that's Johnson Shaft, he'll probably be here. So David, over to you while I hang up some clothes.
Okay, yes, absolutely right. So AT&T produced a chip which theoretically, the fear amongst your sister and what's his name, Bruce McConnell, was that the Clipper chip would prevent the government from monitoring communications between Americans. So what your sister did in a conspiracy, I would guess with a whole variety of people, but in particular the bookmaker of General Alexander Haig, is she dipped into her United States Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which had been running with Eric Holder since 1984. Effectively, it's a slush fund, but it has very important implications. And she bought the entire production of the Clipper chip from AT&T and installed them in phone systems and radio systems developed by McDonald Detweiler in Richmond, BC, so they could monitor the people moving in and out of a crime scene or a mass casualty event with some degree of security. So in 1993, 2 years after Michelle Obama's visit to Washington, Cisco gives McDonald Detweiler a contract to develop Entrust public key infrastructure for Cisco routers and switchgear. So the world's largest internet router production company would then be able to offer insiders, and I'm thinking its institutional shareholders, an opportunity to monitor communications in the financial or military or police sphere and arrange events along the spectrum required by the spread bet bookmaker. So this is 1993. I would suggest, Field, that one of the first series of events in 1993 where Cisco platforms and McDonald Detweiler's public key infrastructure were used to support spread betting was the bombing of the World Trade Center, the attack on the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, where they needed a certain body count. And the fascinating thing about what was done to the bodies in Waco is if they missed the body count, which from memory I believe was 72, they could always bring in some bits of bodies from a local morgue. And I think the DMORT system was running back then. I don't think DMORT necessarily was at the Waco, the Branch Davidian compound. But we have to remember the objective of the bookmaker is to look all powerful, the sort of the Gog Magog on steroids of cyberspace. That is, when the bookmaker said, I'm taking bets now for under and over a spread of 70 to 73 bodies at the Branch Davidian compound, to maintain credibility, and I think perhaps this outfit under a different name has maintained and developed credibility since the 14th century, they have to deliver a very precise number of bodies within the spread. And the punishment for the red team and the blue team, the Skinners and the Merchant Taylors, the people responsible for getting the spot inside the spread, if they fall outside the spread, they're killed. And any whistleblowers, and I would put, very interestingly, Phil, a friend of ours we've been discussing with recently has put me in contact with a lawyer who I know from 8 years ago. We don't need names. And he was explaining to me his theory of how things were going on, which is not 100% away from mine. And he said, well, that he thought maybe the Pope was involved. And I said, no, it's British intelligence. It's British intelligence. He said, David, you know, it's a funny thing. I've often thought you are British intelligence or part of MI5 or MI6. And I said, well, that's interesting because a number of people have told me that. And I think it's because people like Gareth Williams was recruited with a similar background to mine. He was a mathematician at Cambridge. I was a mathematician, well, mechanical engineering and so on. And so British intelligence recruits from a certain group of people. I think they've actually changed their mandate now, who, well, ultimately resemble me. So it's kind of it's kind of complementary to be confused with that recruiting pool, because they do recruit some pretty sharp people. And I think it's intriguing field, because if Rob Paulson is the man that I think he is behind this conspiracy, he was recruited from a similar pool where you might have been recruited into the kind of work he was doing for intelligence in the United States. And it may be that quite a distance on into your career, you wouldn't know that you were being gamed. Is that possible, Field? Over to you.
Well, I'm getting confused if you're talking about me or Alexander Haig. So why don't you chew it up and spit it out in a more laconic fashion, and I'll answer it with a 20-minute run-on sentence.
Yeah. Could you have been recruited for the National Security Administration and gained through a career in the Air Force without you knowing about it until quite late in your career? Is that plausible?
Yes, it's plausible, and I like to answer a mysterious question with a mysterious answer. David, how many oaths have I taken?
4.
Okay, yeah, I've taken 4. What are the 3 oaths that you know about?
Well, no, I can't give the proper oath of loyalty to the Constitution, right?
Yeah, but I took an oath in the Navy in 1967, an oath in the Marine Corps in 1971, and an oath in the Air Force in 1977. But I took a 4th oath on the 14th of February of 1967, and they don't know what that oath is, do they?
No, they don't.
Well, let me just tell you something right now. They can't find out what that oath is. The only way they'll ever find out who I was talking to and what I was swearing to on the 14th of February of 1967 is if they were a party or a witness to that oath taking, and there are no witnesses anymore except me. That's called tick-tock, the game's locked. I think those who read our writing, in fact, you know, it's amazing that you claimed that somebody thought you were an MI5 or an MI6 guy. Randy, what's his name down there in Oklahoma, he thinks so much of the way we do the work we do that he came up with the word faction or friction. No, that's not right. Let's see, fact, fiction, yeah, faction. Because he claims that it's very difficult for anyone to try to determine what's truthful and what's dishonest, but if they just worry about the stuff that they know is truthful and prosecute that, any of the fluff is left on the cutting room floor. But I think it's way past too late for these people to start doing their jobs, and I want to thank the vast majority of the oath-keeping people in the alphabet soup agencies for keeping me alive and well for the last 7 years so I can do your job for you, and I'll continue to do your job. In Philippians 1:6 it says, he who started a good work in you will continue to the day of Christ Jesus. So I don't think Jesus is coming in the next 5 minutes or the next 90 days, but he is coming, and the reason I know he's coming is because it's written and I read it. So if it's written and I read it, I believe it, and that settles it. I think that's roughly the way it goes. And in fact, I could break into a song here. That's the way love goes, babe. That's the music God made for his entire world to sing. It never gets old, it only grows. I think that the love can be growing as soon as the evil is excised, exposed, and dealt with, and I think we're doing a great job in that regard, David. So I promise not to tell anybody what my 4th oath is, unless it's face-to-face and you do a pinky swear, you won't tell. But just to stimulate the people that really do read our stuff with a critical eye, there were allegedly 5 members of the Naval Academy class of 1971 that had some special qualifications, and none of those 5 people knew who the other 4 were until 2 of them died. And the reason the 3 remaining people, even though they don't know each other, they might know the 2 who are dead is because they were operating in a I think you're familiar with the word tontine, David, yes or no?
Yes, Phil.
Yes, a tontine insurance is now illegal in the United States of America, unless, of course, you're working for an agency that uses tontines. But Al Schaufelberger and Chick Burlingame were in the Naval Academy class of '71 doing some interesting things. Chick Burlingame was the war gamer who, working as a captain in the Navy Reserves while concurrent to his job as a captain with American Airlines, he had developed some war gaming tactics for the hijacking of commercial airliners and the flying of them into iconic buildings. Now, isn't it remarkable that he died after he spent years coming up with war games about how to fly aircraft into iconic buildings? Legend has it, it's a legend, it's false legend, but legend has it that Chick Burlingame died when his American Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, which of course it didn't. It was blown up in Whiskey 386 airspace. But Al Schaufelberger, he was not an aviator like Chick. Al Schaufelberger was a special forces guy, a SEAL, and he was assassinated in 1983 in El Salvador, I think. And just to demonstrate how quick Jack Mack, I don't know if Sherlock's here today, I think she's not for some reason, but Jack Mack and Craig can probably find Albert Schaufelberger Jr., and they can check and see where he died in 1983. But he was the first of the five to die. The second of the five was Chick Burlingame on September 11th of 2001, and that leaves three. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Well, it's all coming together very nicely. So I've just reminded while you were talking about the profile we gave to KPMG in the early days with Pat the Times, where that very compelling work by Dr. Nano basically illustrated how KPMG manipulated very complex negotiable instruments to create tax shelters. And this spread betting, of course, has tremendous opportunities for money laundering, because if you put huge amounts of clean money on either side of the spread, which really doesn't move en masse, except that 15% of the bet is paid to the bookie to take care of business. The bookie being Alexander Haig's CAI Private Equity Group. So the bookie receives 15% of the money sitting either side of the spread and takes that 15%, which can run into hundreds of millions of dollars, and points it towards the red team and the blue team responsible for developing a spot within the spread, with the proviso that if they get it wrong, they're dead. So when KPMG Consulting was floated in an IPO, that's an initial public offering of $2.3 billion, the second largest IPO in NASDAQ history, with more than 10,000 employees, KPMG Consulting is one of the world's largest consulting firms. Prior to the IPO, KPMG Consulting was a majority-owned subsidiary of Sidley and Austin client KPMG, which gets the very high profile in that video pattern of the Times, the Big Five audit and tax firm. In the IPO, KPMG LLP and its partners sold to the public all of their equity interest and are raising more than $1.6 billion in proceeds. Now, here's the zinger field. The IPO marks the completion, hang on, it's just popped out of sight again. The IPO marks the completion of a 2.5-year project for Sidley and Austin. Actually, it's known as Sidley Austin. That included the global spin-off of KPMG Consulting from KPMG LLP and a $1 billion investment by Cisco Systems, Inc. in KPMG Consulting. Phil, what Cisco did is it provided them a $1 billion platform for spread betting based on the StarNet model at 425 Carroll Street, where people would be entrapped through sadomasochistic sex, interactive sex, that was upgraded or downgraded in brutality by money paid via credit cards through the online gaming network. So if you want to launder money, you park the big money either side of a spread bet, so the big money doesn't move, but 15% moves into the spread. The spread or the event in the spread creates a huge public wag the dog story. Just think of the news that came out of Sandy Hook Elementary School, that white, Christian, crazed Americans were wandering around with AR-15s blowing heads off children. Total fabrication. But you know what, Field? That story's gone. We still don't know if the children were imported and killed in the morgue, whether they were killed at all, whether they had dead bodies available to get the body count up and the children were abducted and shipped overseas. We know nothing about it. But the intriguing thing to me is here we have a thread where KPMG, Sidley Austin, ends up with $1 billion worth of Cisco hardware that we can trace back to man-in-the-middle attacks starting in 1993 and the 1979 developed by McDonald Detweiler for the first murders out at the pig farm. So it's 12:44, Field. How much longer do you want to go on?
Oh, I don't know. We can quit any time, but I've got some shirts here. The first one is we did this in I was going to say 19. Yeah, maybe we'll try another century. This shirt is from September of 2010. It says up here, Abel Danger, Austin, don't give up on me, Madeline McCann, or as she's generally called, Maddie McCann. So that's an opportunity for me to titillate you with my vast lack of vocal skill. Don't give up on us, baby. We're still worth one more try. I know we let the last one by. Okay, don't give up on we? Who are we? Well, here we are. Plum City Studebakers, also known as Abel Danger. And we are able, more than able, to track down these vermin. And then if we track them down, or if it looks like we're tracking them down, God's already going to hold them accountable as well as us accountable, because we all get to answer for our deeds. And I'm going to test my memory now, but there's something in the Bible, and it's written in Matthew 16, and I can't remember exactly where, maybe 26, but yeah, okay, if somebody could put up Matthew 16, starting at about 12, because we think it's 14 to 16, but what it talks about, oh, wait a minute, or is that Romans? Romans 8:28, yeah, that's what it is, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Romans 8:28 to 30. What it's going to tell you is that God foreknew people, and the foreknown people, meaning the ones that were foreknown to God, he predestined them, and then he justified them, sanctified them, and
Called them,
justified them, and glorified them. Yeah. Okay, so it's everyone's choice. Do you want to be on that team, or do you want to be on the team that takes little girls like Maddie McCann, steals her out of a bungalow in Portugal while her parents, both MDs, are swilling alcohol down by the restaurant? Who knows? No, well, God knows. Which brings us back to Brian Wilson, the remaining brother of the Wilson brothers, better known as the Beach Boys. Now there's a gentle soul, and everybody thought he was a surfer. I don't think he's ever, I'm sure he's been in the ocean, he's never surfed. But just like the elder BG, these guys outlived their brothers, and the later solo appearances of Brian Wilson show you his heart as well as his creative genius. And if you can take a look at a couple of songs he sang, God only knows what I'd be without you. I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you. Anyway, I can't sing, but I'm not giving up on Maddie McCann, because no one may ever find her. or someone might. But we can sure make it more difficult for these people to do more and more of these heinous acts. And David, even though we forget just like they forget, like a lot of people have forgotten about Sandy Hook, well, unfortunately for Governor Malloy, he came out today with his big dishonest mouth and said they're working on publishing a final timeline. Well, about an hour ago, I sent him the final timeline for the Sandy Hook, and it was that Google bait thing that had Napolitano and McConnell and 5 other things, DHS. And most of you people have never met me. Those that have met me know that there's no way in the world that I'd try to take credit for somebody else's thinking. But they also know I'm not likely to cower. You know, if you're staring at some power that's evil, there's no reason to be afraid of the evil side, because they can't touch me. And I don't think they can touch any of us if we call upon God to protect us, like I've done. David, over to you.
Yeah, okay, Phil. Well, I think we've done a good hour and a half, so I'm ready to shut down when you are.
Okay, Shutdown was a song by the Beach Boys, and it's funny you should pick Shutdown, because the opening lines of Shutdown, which I listened to 3 times on my way to the Minneapolis airport between 8:30 and 11, it starts out like this. It happened on the strip where the road is wide. 2 cool shorts standing side by side. My fuel-injected Stingray in the 413. Well, 413 is a max wedge V8 built by Chrysler Corporation, because the CEO of Chrysler was sick and tired of Fords and Chevys beating up on Plymouths and Dodges. So he gathered his, in fact, you can Google this and check it to be true. He got his automotive engineers in the engine building department. He said, I don't care what it costs, build me a V8 engine that'll blow away the Fords and the Chevys. That's why the Beach Boys sang about the 413. That's why Agent McCheese has a 413 in his RV called the Beast. And that's why I bought Tillman's Ghost, which is a 413 powered 1940 Studebaker, that anybody who hasn't seen the YouTube that I didn't make, but someone named Craig Peterson, who should remain nameless, made it. You can just do a Google search for Pat Tillman's Ghost, search at YouTube, you'll find it right away. And so, David, if somebody will put up, oh, they put up the Beach Boys, but if somebody would put up the big red button, and I see Mensa Max is not here today, so Ginger Cookie knows how to do the big red button. But if somebody puts up the big red button, you could say goodbye first, I'll say goodbye second, and then I'll wait for the countdown.
Okay, bye from me, Field, and forward to our next performance on Monday. So I'm 70 on the 7th of August, so I'm crossing my fingers that we've got a denouement. Over to you.
A denouement, as we like to say. Before I push that button, somebody's got to give me a countdown, but I want to read Romans 8:28 to 30. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of the Son, that he might be firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called, and who he called he also justified, and whom he justified he also glorified. I can explain that in chapter 23, and I promise I will. Now I'm going to go looking for the big red button. I see the big red button. I see the countdown starting, so I've got to ready myself. 3, 2, 1. Somebody's about ready to say push it, in which case the camera will be on the button and I will push it, even if I'm in mid-sentence. I see 3, 2, 1. I see time expired, but I'm not biting on chaff. If somebody doesn't push it or push it good, I'll settle for that. And if somebody's put it up and I haven't pushed it, it's simply because I'm lagging. Plum City has fairly slow internet, I think. Jack Mac can tell you for sure. Thanks, Jack Mac and Ginger, it says. Do it, man. Okay,